My father was going to take me that morning to his funeral and then to the church service, and I got arrested that morning. And he says, listen, if you could get this route back, I could give you between $500 and $1,000 a week to you and Tony Lee and your father. If you get, they already whacked his uncle, Paul Castellano. He knows that the guy sitting across the desk was one of the guys that killed Paul. You know, John's the boss. We figured this guy was going to cave, but you know what? I got to give him credit. He didn't cave. This woman cop started shooting at them without identifying themselves, and her partner got shot and killed. Welcome everybody to Reformed Gangsters. My name's Anthony Ruggiano Jr. and I want to let everybody know, if you like my content, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell, and also become a Patreon member to support the channel and, you know, get your questions about Mafia history answered. I'll come on live. I had an incredible month. I went well over 20,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel. I want to thank everybody for subscribing, and I want to thank all the people that are on Patreon for their support. I have a couple of announcements coming up for the rest of October. It's going to be a very exciting month. As you all know, October 24th, the long-awaited show that I did for Netflix through Raw Productions is finally going to be premiered on Netflix, and that's going to premiere on October 24th of this year, next week. I filmed that show about almost 2 years ago, and it's been being edited and dubbed in and all that. So there's a lot of content on there. It was an exciting experience. It's going to be 3 episodes. And from what I understand, I'm in all 3 episodes. So I'm looking forward to that. So that's going to be on October 24th. And on that day, October 24th at 7:30 p.m., I'm going to have a discussion about the show. I'm going to come on live and take all your calls and all your questions about the show. So please, if you get a chance, watch it that day, or, you know, talk to somebody that did watch it, and we'll discuss it that night. And I'll discuss it again further after that day. It's not only going to be discussed on that night, but that's the premiere night, so we'll discuss that. Also, a couple of days after that is my birthday, which is October 29th, and I'm going to be the ripe old age of 70, which, you know, is a big number. But on October 28th, the night before my birthday, I'm going to be on, and we're going to have some special guests coming on to wish me a happy birthday. Sammy the Bull will be on. From what my manager just told me, he already agreed to come on, which is, I'm looking forward to that. I'm also discussing it with Michael Francis, who's, I believe, still in Arizona. I'm waiting for him to get back to me. He may come on for a couple of minutes because, you know, we're all in our 70s. Sammy's the senior. He's 78. Michael's 72, and now I'm 70. You know, it's a big number, so we all have that in common. It's also 2 days after John Gotti's birthday, my fellow Scorpio. His birthday is the 27th. So, you know, we'll discuss that. So I'm looking forward to that. And I just want to say a few words about Tommy Gambino, who passed away this last week. I knew Tommy. I never got the privilege of meeting his father. I was around working with my father when his father was still alive, but I never had the privilege of meeting his father. Actually, the day of his father's funeral, that morning, my father was going to take me that morning to his funeral and then to the church service, and I got arrested that morning. I didn't actually get arrested in the street. What happened was there was a warrant on me for something stupid, like driving with a suspended license, and I missed a court date, like some dumb shit. And the detectives called up my house and said I had they were going to come and arrest me. That's what they used to do. They used to call up, and I would wait outside for them. That's how many times I got arrested. So I didn't want them to arrest me in front of my door, so I met them on Atlantic Avenue and 88th Street the morning of Carl Gambino's funeral. And actually, when they put me in the back seat of the car and cuffed me, their first question was, "Is your father going to the funeral?" And I said, yeah. And off I went, for the day to the Queen's House of Detention. But getting back to Tommy, so as we all know, Tommy was owned Consolidated Trucking, which was a major trucking outfit out of the garment center. The dresses and materials and fabrics, and major cargo company. And not long after John became the boss, it wasn't much longer after that, because Angelo Quack Quack was the captain. Then it was Tony Lee's captain at the time. My father was in prison, and a friend of mine, some kid from the neighborhood who was a truck driver, came to my house. I lived on 79th Street in Lindenwood with my wife and my son at the time, and this kid came to my house. I believe his name was Benny. He came to my house and he told me, listen, I had a dress route. He had, because back then there was all these sweatshops that made dresses, and it was a route, and he had this dress route, and he said that Consolidated bought up all these routes, like bid it and took over all these routes, and one of the routes was his. And he says, listen, if you could get this route back, I could give you between $500 and $1,000 a week to you and Tony Lee and your father if you get this route back. So that was a big number back then. The kid had a big route. So I went to Tony Lee, and I told Tony Lee the situation, and he reached out to Angelo Quack, and we told Angelo the situation, and Angelo made an appointment to see Tommy Gambino. So now John's the boss. He just had become the boss. So we figured it was a no-brainer that, we were going to get this route back, and I'm counting the money already. Like I'm going, 500, 1,000, half of it's mine, half of it's Tony Lee's and my father's. Angelo ain't going to take nothing. Maybe we'll give him he might take a couple, but there was money in it for us, and so I was already had the money spent. I already had my money spent every week. That's how I lived back then. So we go to Tommy's office, Tony Lee, myself, and Angelo Quack. And we go to Tommy's office, and very, respectful guy. He looks just like his father. We're in his office, and, they introduced me to him, and, Fat Andy said, oh my God, I love your father. He knows me since I'm a kid. My father loved your father. Carl loved my father, loved your father. What a guy, what a man. So, he's giving me all these accolades about how great my father is. Now in my brain, I'm going, oh my God, I'm in, right? So now they tell Tommy the story. So I lay it out for Tommy. I go, the guy came to me, blah, blah, blah. He had the dress route. You took over all these routes. And, maybe if you could give this kid back his route, we'll be partners with him. And, and he was very humble, and he was sitting there, and he's looking at us, and he's sitting there, and he's, nodding his head, and he's going like this. And then he just I finished telling the story to him, and he just sat back like in his chair, and he put his hands like this on the desk, and he was sitting there like contemplating it, and he looked at me, and he looked at Angelo, and he looked at Tony Lee, and he went, I wish I could do that. And when he said he wished, my whole everything dropped into my feet. Like I went, and he goes, I wish I could do this for you. He says, but if I do this favor for you, how do I tell the next person that rings my bell no? And the next person that rings my bell no? And the next person that rings my bell no? Because if I give you back this route, how do I say no to the next person that wants their route back? We were dumbfounded. The three of us, we didn't even know what to say. The air left the room. Like Angelo Quack almost fell out of the friggin' chair. Like we were like, the air left the room. Like literally, we were just staring at each other. The three of us, like the three dummies, three blind mice. We didn't even know. Like we all probably felt like jumping over the desk and choking him. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to like smack him right off the chair. Now my whole insides changed. I'm like, and I could see Tony Lee, the rage in Tony Lee's face. Like, but what are we gonna do? What are you gonna do? We couldn't start screaming at the guy. Like, what are you kidding me? Like you could see the rage in Tony Lee's face. Like when he, so Angelo goes, really? That's the best you could. I mean, that's it? So Tommy goes, Angelo, what do you want me to tell you? I can't do it. He goes, I can't give the kid the route. What do I do? How do I tell the next friend that comes? I mean, he had a little bit of a point. You know what I mean? But, you know, we weren't going to go have a parade and say Tommy Gambino gave us the route back. You know what I mean? But, you know, so he had a legitimate point. But come on. You know, my father's in jail doing 40 years. He killed people for his father. He knows it. They already whacked his uncle, Paul Castellano. He knows that the guy sitting across the desk was one of the guys that killed Paul. You know, John's the boss. We figured this guy was going to cave. But you know what? I got to give him credit. He didn't cave. You know, he held that red line, man. You know, he said no. We walked out of that office. When we got in the car, they were screaming. Tony Lee was screaming at Angelo. What are you kidding me? How could you make this guy? Because Tony Lee thought Angelo would be more forceful with it. You know what I mean? But Angelo like backed up actually. And Tony Lee's beef at that. Now we're in the car, the three of us, and we're leaving. And Tony Lee's like yelling, like, how could you let this guy say no to us? What do you didn't, you know, like you should have been into him and you should have went at him and Tony Lee was pissed off, you know. But you know, that's the mob. You know, that's the mob. It's greed. You know, now here's a guy, Tommy Gambino, that hundreds of millions. I mean, my father told me that God only knows how much money they had in Swiss accounts in Switzerland and Italy, and tens and tens of millions of dollars in cash. I mean, the guy was a legitimate millionaire, an illegal millionaire. I mean, you're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars, and he wouldn't even give up a couple of $1,000 a route that's worth a couple of $1,000, not millions, couple of, like, you know, but that's the mob. You know, I'm not, you know, that's the mob. Maybe if the shoe was on the other foot, we might have done the same thing. You know, and we might have done the same thing. I think we went in there very overconfident because, you know, John was the boss. Tommy knew they whacked Paul. Paul was Tommy's uncle. You know, I think we went in there really overconfident. And when he told us no, I think we were like more, I don't know, how could I explain it? We were like lost for words. yeah, that's about it. Yeah, we were lost for words, you know. So I know if Tony Lee at that time was the captain, there would have been a bigger beef in that room. Like Angelo he didn't back down. He just let it go. Like he didn't back down. He just, you know, like, what are you kidding me? Like, that's the best you could do, you know? And then like, then when Tommy goes, what do I tell the next friend that walks in the door? You know, Angelo just let it go at that point, you know? So that's my Tommy Gambino story. I had seen him again after that at funerals. I think I saw him again at Joe Gallo's funeral. He was the consigliere of the Gambino family. And I would run into him at the Ravenite every now and then, you know, but he was always respectful. I always said hello to him. You know, I never, you know, what am I going to do? I'm not, you know, but always when I saw him in the back of my head, I used to, that fucking cheap bastard, you know what I mean? Greedy bastard. But, you know, let him rest in peace. You know, he had a nice life. You know, he did a little time, so let him rest in peace. And so that's my Tommy Gambino story. If you enjoy my show, please join my Patreon, ask your questions live, and please join my Patreon at reformgangsters.com. A couple of people wanted me to talk about Fritzy Giovanelli, Fritzy Cabo. He was a captain with the Genovese family. My father and myself and our families were very close. They come from East New York. I mean, his uncle Zetti and his uncles used to hang out at Cafe Liberty. One of his uncles was a furniture salesman. We used to buy all our furniture off him. They were both Italian guys from Italy, good guys, nice guys. His two uncles, always drinking wine. But, you know, he was a tough guy, a lot of money, big number banker. We did a lot of business with him, with our number business. He was even my edge-off guy when I had a sports business. So back in the day, you know, there was no computers figuring out how to move our money. We had to figure it out on our own. You know, we had to like actually figure things out. Like it wasn't on an algorithm, whatever the hell they call it. So on Sundays during football season, he was our edge off guy. So when we took a lot of money on one team, we would edge it off to him. I mean, I'm talking about like, there was times I had to bring him 20,000 and times he had to give me 20,000. So it was no little bits amount of money. He had a big sports office. We would edge off to him. He banked on numbers for a couple of years. He was our number banker. And he had a great relationship with my family, with my father. They were great friends. They did a lot of time together also. But, a lot of people want to know about that cop incident. And what happened was he was a big number bank, and they had number offices where there was cash, a lot of cash flow going around. And one night they spotted people laying outside with guns. So Fritzy went there and everything loaded up, and they came out, and they thought they were getting robbed, and they were being followed. They thought they were getting robbed, and they had a shootout. And the police, this woman cop, started shooting at them without identifying themselves, and her partner got shot and killed. It was a shootout, but the police never identified themselves. And Fritzy and two other guys got arrested, and they were laid up on Rikers Island for a long time, a couple of years, fighting the case, and they couldn't convict them. They couldn't convict them because they never identified themselves. I think the woman got thrown off the force. I don't know, something happened to her. They fired her, or she resigned. But she's the one that really created the incident. This woman cop, this woman undercover cop or detective, the organized crime task force woman. She just started blasting them without identifying themselves, and the other cop got killed. But he paid a heavy price for that. They went after him forever after that, and the feds got him, and he went to prison for a long while. But that was all just a big misunderstanding. Nobody identified themselves, and I believe he went to trial a few times for that murder case, for that cop case. And he got hung juries every time he went. He got hung juries because they never identified themselves. So that's about Fritzy. There's a lot of other stuff I could talk about. And if anybody has any questions, they could write in or come on live. When I come live next week, we could talk about Fritzy. Let's see what else I got. Oh, someone wants to know about Mikey Gal, Tony Lee's brother. What is there to say about Mikey Gal? He was a character. My father used to call him Balloonhead. Yeah, he was just a character. They straightened him out when the books were open. He was like one of the last ones to go in back then when the books first opened, after Nicky and everybody. He was a good guy. He treated me well. He was involved in a murder with me. He was the doorman in a murder with me. But he was a good guy. He was a bit of a gambler, a bit of a loudmouth, but he knew everybody. I mean, one thing about Mikey Gal, if you wanted to contact somebody in any borough in New York City, you told Mikey Gal you needed to see somebody, and he knew where they stood, and he knew how to get in touch with them. That was that was what he was known for. He knew where everybody was at all times. Who made Tony Lee? Well, you see, all right, so this is what happened with Tony Lee. Tony Lee had an uncle named Willie. He was a wise guy with the Genoveses. He was a very wealthy, wise guy with the Genoveses when Vito Genovese was actually alive. He actually had a piece of Cuba, his uncle Willie, and he actually had a piece of Cuba. A very wealthy guy from the Bronx. I don't know how he wound up living in the Bronx when Tony Lee was living in Brooklyn. I think when he got married, his wife came from the Bronx. So whatever. Well, anyway, so when the books got opened in the 50s, Tony Lee could have got his uncle Willie offered to propose him, and my father offered to propose him, and Tony Lee was given the choice of either to get straightened out with the Genoveses, with his uncle Willie, and go on his own, or stay partners with my father and get straightened out with Albert Anastasia. And because of his relationship with my father, he chose my father. And so he got straightened out by Albert Anastasia. My father wound up proposing Tony Lee. And how it happened was right before the books closed again, Albert Anastasia actually told my father and a couple of other guys, is there anybody else that we need to straighten out before the books close? And my father said, yeah, Tony Lee, and Albert straightened Tony Lee out. But he had a choice, Tony Lee, either to get straightened out with his uncle Willie or with my father, and he chose my father. And he always used to tease me and go, I made a bad decision. But he always used to tease us. I should have went with my uncle Willie. But that's because he loved my father, so they stood together. They were partners until they died. So yeah, he got straightened out with them, with Albert Anastasia.
All right, Chris Pearson says John Jr. proffered, and I read the 302s, but he named dead guys. If he was gonna flip, why would he serve his sentence and then flip? He went away in 1999 and profited in 2005.
Okay, so our opinion on all that is he profited. He met with the FBI. He met with U.S. attorneys. He gave up dead guys. Once you profit, that's it. You cooperated, no matter if you gave up dead guys, live guys. What we think happened, what my opinion is, that he tried to manipulate the government out of re-indicting him, because I believe he got re-indicted after that, and he was trying to stop himself from being indicted. And I think the rumor is that when he was in that room with the FBI and he started talking, he was talking about dead guys, and then he started getting cold feet because the FBI, listen, they know everything, and they must have asked him questions about guys that were still around, even like his own Uncle Jeannie, who they know murdered people and who was alive, who was in prison. So he probably got cold feet and stopped profiting. And they started hitting him with questions about, I profit. So I know it's not, you don't just go in there and just talk. They ask you 1,000,001 questions. When I profit, I was in a room with 20 of them, and they were hitting me with questions from every angle, about every topic, about everybody. So he wasn't in there proffering, making a speech. He was in there being questioned. And the rumor is, and my opinion is, that at some point he got cold feet and shut it down, because when it came to time to talk about people that weren't dead, he backed out, but once you meet with the government, you met with the government, that stigma is never going to leave you. You can't just clean it up and say, well, I only talked about dead guys. It doesn't matter. You met with them, you opened up that can of worms, and there's nothing else to talk about. After that, you could try to clean it up all you want, but there's no way you're going to clean that up.
So Jean Paloletto says, Anthony, I'm Frankie Loke's nephew, or should I say I called him Uncle Frank my whole life. His brother Joe as well. Went to live with Frankie upstate after my mom died. Dad took me because I was getting in trouble. My question is, did you know a guy named Gene Artoso or Gene the Baker?
I know of him. I heard his name mentioned a few times. I know Frank had a place upstate, so I'm sure this guy, whoever this nephew is, did go upstate, but I didn't know the person he's talking about, but I knew of him.
All right, so Brad Nicole says, Anthony, can you answer a question for me, please? I've heard from a few sources that during Frankie Loke's prison sentence with Gotti, that Gotti turned on Frankie and actually put a contract on him, and the prisoners, person's department found out about it and locked Frankie in seg for his own protection. Do you know why Gotti would do that to Frankie, who seemed to be very loyal to Gotti?
That was a rumor because of Sammy stating that him and Frankie were going to kill John. I never heard really much about that. I don't believe that's true, but I know that's what people were talking about due to the fact Sammy revealed that him and Frankie were actually talking about killing John at some point. So did that happen? It might have been. I never heard it happen, but that was the rumor. But it's all because of what Sammy testified to and talked about.
All right, so Johnny Mays, another thing that wasn't real, mobsters pay up everything. They don't make shit when you're a soldier. You better have a good hustle or you'll starve. Is that true?
No, that's not true. Listen, there's soldiers that were broken. There's soldiers that became millionaires. My father made crazy money when he was a soldier. He had one of the biggest crews in the city. He had 70 guys with him. He was getting envelopes every month. And they gave, my father and Tony kicked up a certain percent to the top three, to Neil and Carl and Paul at the time, and then Joe Gallo. They kicked up on Christmas. They gave them a big envelope. But if they had dice games, the Brigada got 10% off the top. They got pays. They always had an end of everything. But that's not true. Then I knew wise guys that were broke. I knew wise guys that actually worked with me in crap games and made the same amount of money I made, and they were made members of the mob, you know. So no, that's not true. You know, when you become a made member, if you have a brain on your shoulder, you're going to make money, you know. But some people don't, and some people do. There's some people that just don't know how to earn money. They got straightened out because they were killers, or they got straightened out because they were tough guys, and they don't know how to earn money. So of course they're going to starve. But on the average, a lot of wise guys I knew were very, very wealthy, and they were just soldiers. A lot of them were very wealthy.
So what did you think about Adriana's hit on Chris giving her up to Tony?
I love these questions about movies. First of all, that's Hollywood. In real life, if that happened in a real life scenario, and you in that life, and you were a guy like Christopher, you know, he did the right thing as far as that life was concerned. You know, in real life, when someone cooperates, they're supposed to die. That's the rules, male or female, it doesn't matter. So as far as real life's concerned, he did the right thing. You know, and I was pretty realistic. You know, he couldn't do it himself, and he told Tony, "Don't make me do it." You know, that's understandable because he was allegedly in love with her. But you know, the females do die in the mob. I mean, we know of females that I know too, right off the bat. That one female that Greg Scapa killed in his club, and one female that Jimmy Burke and Tommy DeSimone killed. They found her beheaded in the canal in Long Island. So females do die in the mob when they overhear or say things they're not supposed to hear or say.
So when you hear the phrase crime boss, who comes to mind?
John. I mean, and John Gotti. I mean, you know, comes to mind. You know, before John Gotti, I would say Al Capone. They were the two most publicized mob bosses ever, Al Capone and John Gotti. So when you hear crime boss, you know, you think of John. He was the boss when I was around. He's the boss that I knew that I had a personal relationship with.
What made John a boss?
He killed Paul Castellano, and the captains voted him in the boss. You know, I said this on a lot of shows, and I said this a lot of times. When I was a teenager, my father told me 3 things were going to happen to John Gotti. And he told me this more than once. He said either he was going to get 100 years in jail, get shot in the head, or become the boss. And 2 out of them 3 things happened to him. He got life in prison, and he became the boss. And they tried to kill him, but they missed him. So that was my father's prediction for John Gotti.